She stood outside the building for almost 3 full minutes, keys in hand, staring at the glass door as if it might tell her something. It was an ordinary Tuesday afternoon in September. The sun was still bright. Traffic hummed along the street behind her. People walked past without looking twice. Everything about the moment was unremarkable. She could have turned around. She could have gotten back in her car and driven home. She almost did. Her hand was halfway to her pocket when she stopped herself, shook her head at her own hesitation, and pulled the door open. That choice, that single decision made in the span of a heartbeat, would be the last normal thing she ever did. And for everyone who loved her, that moment would become the dividing line between before and after. The moment they would replay endlessly, wondering what instinct she'd ignored, what warning she'd dismissed, and whether she'd felt, even for a second, that something was wrong. Her name was Lauren Ashford, though certain details have been altered to protect the privacy of those still grieving. She was 31 years old, an occupational therapist working at a pediatric clinic in a mid-sized city in the Midwest. People who knew her described her as thoughtful, organized, and deeply empathetic. She had a gift for connecting with children who struggled with sensory processing or motor skills, and parents often requested her specifically. Her coworkers loved her. Her friends considered her dependable. Her family thought she was the glue that held everyone together. She lived alone in a small but well-kept apartment near the downtown area, drove a 6-year-old sedan that she maintained meticulously, and spent her weekends hiking, reading, or visiting her parents who lived 40 minutes away. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't naive. She was careful in the way most women learn to be careful, aware of her surroundings, cautious about strangers, practiced at assessing situations for potential danger. On the morning of September 17th, Lauren woke at 6:30, the same time she woke every weekday. She made coffee, scrambled 2 eggs, and ate breakfast while scrolling through news on her phone. She showered, dressed in navy scrubs and comfortable sneakers, and left her apartment at 7:45. Her first patient was scheduled for 8:30. The drive to the clinic took 12 minutes on a normal day. That morning, traffic was light. She arrived early, parked in her usual spot, and spent the extra time responding to emails in her car. At 8:27, she walked into the clinic, waved to the receptionist, and began her day. She worked with 5 children that morning. A 4-year-old working on fine motor skills, a 7-year-old with coordination challenges, an 8-year-old learning to navigate sensory overload. Each session was routine, successful, unremarkable. She documented her notes, consulted with parents, and tidied her therapy room between appointments. At 12:15, she took her lunch break. She'd packed a salad and ate it in the staff lounge while chatting with a colleague about weekend plans. They talked about a new restaurant that had opened nearby. They laughed about a child who'd announced during therapy that his favorite food was crunchy air, by which he meant popcorn. It was the kind of easy, forgettable conversation that happens every day in break rooms across the country. At 12:40, Lauren returned to her therapy room and prepared for her afternoon sessions. She had 3 more appointments scheduled. The last one ended at 4:30. She cleaned her workspace, filed her paperwork, and said goodbye to the receptionist as she left the building at 4:52. Security footage would later confirm the exact time. She walked to her car, unlocked it, placed her bag on the passenger seat, and sat for a moment checking her phone. Then she started the engine and pulled out of the parking lot, turning left toward the downtown area instead of right toward her apartment. This is where the story begins to shift, though no one knew it yet. Lauren had received a text message during her last session, one she hadn't checked until she was in her car. It was from a number she didn't recognize, no name attached, just 10 digits. The message was brief and slightly confusing. It said someone had found her wallet and asked if she could come pick it up from an office building about 15 minutes away. The message included an address and a suite number. Lauren stared at the text, confused. She checked her purse. Her wallet was inside, exactly where it should be. She hadn't lost anything. She considered ignoring the message entirely, assuming it was a mistake or possibly a scam. But something made her hesitate. What if it was her wallet, and she just hadn't noticed it was missing? What if someone with a similar name had lost theirs, and this was a genuine attempt to help? What if ignoring it meant someone else's wallet stayed lost? She sat in her car for almost 5 minutes, debating. The rational part of her brain said to delete the message and drive home. But the part of her that hated leaving loose ends, that felt compelled to be helpful even when it inconvenienced her, won out. She typed a reply. "Are you sure it's mine? I have my wallet with me." The response came 30 seconds later. "Maybe you have too. This one has your driver's license in it. I'm here until 6 if you want to grab it." Lauren frowned at her phone. She definitely didn't have 2 wallets. But the mention of her driver's license made her uneasy in a different way. If someone actually had a wallet with her identification in it, that was a problem she needed to address, whether it belonged to her or not. Identity theft was a real concern. She couldn't just ignore it. She glanced at the time. It was 5:03. The address wasn't far. She could be there in 15 minutes, verify whether this was real or a mistake, and still be home by 6. It seemed reasonable. It seemed safe. The building was in a commercial district, not some isolated location. It would be fine. She pulled up the address on her phone's map. The building was a small office complex near the edge of downtown, one of those nondescript structures that house insurance agencies, accountants, and medical billing companies. Nothing about it seemed unusual or threatening. She put the car in drive and headed toward the address, navigating through early rush-hour traffic with the same competence she brought to everything in her life. She didn't call anyone to let them know where she was going. Why would she? It was a quick errand, something that would take 10 minutes at most. She didn't text her location to a friend. She didn't think about the fact that the number wasn't saved in her contacts or that the message itself was oddly vague. She was making a decision that thousands of people make every day, choosing to trust that a situation is what it appears to be, that people are generally honest, that the world is mostly safe. And most of the time, those assumptions are correct. Most of the time, nothing bad happens. She arrived at the building at 5:21. Parking was easy, just a small lot in front with spaces clearly marked for visitors. The building itself was 2 stories, tan brick with narrow windows and a single entrance. There was a directory by the door listing about 15 different businesses, everything from a tax preparation service to a chiropractor's office. She found the suite number from the text message. Suite 2B. No business name listed next to it. That should have been a red flag, but Lauren told herself it might be a new tenant or a temporary office space. She stood outside the building looking at the glass door, feeling the first real prickle of doubt. The parking lot was nearly empty. Only 3 other cars. The building looked older, slightly run down. There were no other people visible. It was quiet in a way that urban spaces rarely are. She pulled out her phone and looked at the text messages again, reading them more carefully this time. The grammar was fine. The tone was polite. But there was something off about it that she couldn't quite identify. It was too efficient, maybe. Too impersonal. She thought about getting back in her car. She thought about calling the number and asking more questions. She thought about how silly she'd feel if she drove all the way here and then left without even checking. What would she tell herself later? That she got scared of an office building in broad daylight? That she ran away from a text message? It seemed absurd, paranoid, the kind of overreaction that she'd spent most of her life trying to avoid. So she took a breath, pulled the door open, and stepped inside. The lobby was small and poorly lit, with worn carpet and a faint smell of old air conditioning. There was a stairwell to her left and an elevator straight ahead. The directory on the wall was outdated, with several names scratched out and a few handwritten additions. Suite 2B was listed as vacant. That should have been the moment she turned around. That should have been the moment she trusted her instincts and left. But she was already inside, already committed to the errand. And the thought of explaining to herself why she'd chickened out felt more uncomfortable than just going upstairs and confirming it was a mistake. She walked to the stairwell, her footsteps echoing on the tile floor, and started climbing to the 2nd floor. The stairs were narrow and dimly lit. She could hear the hum of fluorescent lights somewhere above her. Nothing else. No voices. No movement. Just silence. The second-floor hallway was even quieter. 4 doors on each side, all of them closed. Suite 2B was the third door on the right. There was no nameplate, no sign, nothing to indicate what the office was used for. Lauren stood in front of the door, every nerve in her body suddenly screaming that this was wrong. The building was too quiet. The suite was too empty. The whole situation felt staged. She should leave. She should leave right now. She reached for her phone, intending to call someone, maybe her brother, maybe a friend, just someone who would know where she was. But before she could pull it out, the door opened. Not all the way. Just a crack. And a voice from inside said, "Lauren, come on in. I have your wallet right here." What happened next remains unclear in many of its specifics, pieced together through forensic evidence, surveillance footage from surrounding buildings, and the eventual testimony of witnesses who came forward too late. What is known is that Lauren did not leave that building the way she entered. Her car was found in the parking lot the next morning, exactly where she'd left it, keys still in the ignition, her purse on the passenger seat with her actual wallet still inside. Her phone was discovered 3 days later in a dumpster 2 miles away, smashed beyond any possibility of data recovery, and Lauren herself was gone, vanished, as if she'd simply ceased to exist the moment she walked through that door. Her family reported her missing when she didn't show up for dinner at her parents' house that evening, something she'd confirmed by text that very morning. Her mother called at 7:15, then again at 7:30, growing increasingly worried when Lauren didn't answer. Her father drove to her apartment and found it empty, lights off, no sign she'd been home. They called the clinic. They called her friends. No one had seen her since she left work. By 9 that night, they'd contacted the police, who initially treated it as a potential voluntary disappearance, a young woman who'd decided to take off without telling anyone. But Lauren's parents knew better. Their daughter didn't do things like that. She was responsible, communicative, deeply connected to her family. If she was missing, something was very wrong. The investigation began in earnest the following morning when her car was discovered. Police reviewed security footage from nearby businesses and pieced together her route from the clinic to the office building. They identified the building she'd entered and obtained access to search it. Suite 2B was empty, completely empty. No furniture, no equipment, no signs of recent occupancy. The space had been vacant for 8 months, according to the property manager, who said no one had inquired about renting it in that entire time. The doors were supposed to be locked. They weren't. Someone had been inside. There were scuff marks on the floor, faint but visible under forensic lighting. There were fingerprints on the doorknob, but they were smudged, likely wiped. And there was a single strand of hair caught in the doorframe that would later be confirmed as Lauren's through DNA analysis. Investigators tried to trace the phone number that had sent the text messages. It was a burner phone, purchased with cash at a big box store 2 weeks earlier, activated the day before Lauren disappeared, and never used again after that final text. The store's security footage was reviewed, but the individual who purchased the phone had worn a baseball cap pulled low and kept their face turned away from cameras. They paid cash. They left no trail. The messages themselves had been sent from a location near the clinic where Lauren worked, suggesting the sender had been watching her, waiting for her to leave, timing the texts to catch her while she was still in her car and vulnerable to the suggestion of an errand. The police canvass of the area around the office building turned up a single witness, a man who'd been walking his dog near the parking lot around 5:30 that evening. He remembered seeing a woman who matched Lauren's description standing outside the building looking at her phone. He said she seemed hesitant, like she was deciding whether to go inside. He didn't see her enter. He didn't see anyone else. But he did recall noticing a dark van parked near the side of the building, something about it catching his attention because it seemed out of place in a nearly empty lot. He couldn't remember the make or model. He didn't get the license plate. It was just a detail, a fragment of memory that might mean everything or nothing. By the time police located him and took his statement, the van was long gone. Weeks turned into months. The case generated local media attention. Lauren's photo was shared widely. Tips came in, hundreds of them, none leading anywhere concrete. A woman matching her description was allegedly seen at a gas station 3 states away. Another sighting placed her at a bus station. A psychic called claiming to know where she was buried. Every lead was followed, every tip investigated. All of them led nowhere. The truth was, after Lauren walked through that door, she disappeared so completely that it was as if the building itself had swallowed her. No body was ever found. No additional evidence was ever recovered. No suspect was ever identified. The case went cold. Not because investigators stopped caring, but because there was nowhere left to look. Her family never stopped searching. They hired private investigators. They maintained a website dedicated to her case. They gave interviews on podcasts and true crime shows, hoping someone somewhere might recognize a detail that could break the case open. Her mother kept Lauren's apartment exactly as it was for 2 years, unable to accept that her daughter wasn't coming home. Her father spent every weekend driving through areas where witnesses claimed to have seen her, following leads that police had already exhausted. Her brother created a database of similar cases, looking for patterns, hoping to find a connection that investigators might have missed. They did everything right. They never gave up. But sometimes, effort isn't enough. Sometimes, the answers just aren't there. The question that haunts everyone who knows this story is the simplest and most painful one. What if she hadn't gone inside? What if she'd listened to that initial hesitation, that flicker of doubt she felt standing in the parking lot? What if she'd made the call to verify the text before driving to the building? What if she'd told someone where she was going? The answers are obvious and unbearable. If she'd made any one of those different choices, she'd likely still be alive. She'd be at work right now, helping children learn to tie their shoes and hold pencils. She'd be having dinner with her parents on Sunday. She'd be texting her friends about weekend plans. One decision, one moment, one choice that seemed insignificant at the time, but carried a weight no one could have predicted. But there's a cruelty in that kind of hindsight, a violence in the way it assigns blame to the victim for not predicting the unpredictable. Lauren didn't do anything wrong. She didn't make a reckless choice. She didn't ignore obvious danger signs. She responded to what appeared to be a reasonable situation with reasonable caution. The fault lies entirely with whoever sent those messages, whoever lured her to that building, whoever took advantage of her decency and her desire to be helpful. The tragedy isn't that Lauren made a bad decision. The tragedy is that someone weaponized her good intentions against her. There are details about the case that still don't make sense. How did the person who texted her know she worked at that clinic? How did they time the messages so precisely? Had they been watching her for days, weeks, learning her patterns and routines? Or was she targeted randomly, a victim of opportunity rather than a planned abduction? The answers to these questions might exist somewhere, locked in the mind of whoever took her, but they've never been shared. The investigation remains technically open, but without new evidence, without witnesses, without even a crime scene that yields meaningful forensic data, there's little investigators can do beyond wait for a break that may never come. Lauren's case is not unique. Every year, thousands of people disappear under circumstances that remain unexplained. They walk out of their homes, their workplaces, their lives, and simply never return. Some are found eventually, their stories ending in tragedy or rarely in relief. Others remain missing forever, existing in that terrible limbo where families can neither grieve nor hope. And a few, like Lauren, vanish so completely that the only evidence they were ever in danger is the fact of their absence. No witnesses, no remains, no closure, just an empty space where a person used to be. The building where Lauren was last seen still stands. Suite 2B has been rented twice since her disappearance, both times to small businesses that eventually moved out, complaining about the space feeling wrong somehow, though they couldn't articulate exactly what they meant. The property manager says people avoid the suite now, that it has a reputation even though nothing was ever proven to have happened there. Maybe that's just superstition, or maybe buildings remember things the way people do, holding on to trauma in their walls and floors long after the specific events have passed. Lauren would be 36 now. Her birthday passes every year without her. Her parents mark it quietly, privately, in ways they don't share publicly. Her friends have moved on with their lives, though they think of her often, wondering where she is, whether she's still alive somewhere, whether she thinks of them too. Her nieces and nephews, born after she disappeared, know her only through photos and stories, a ghost aunt who exists more as concept than person. And somewhere, in a file cabinet in a police department, her case sits waiting for a confession, waiting for remains to be found, waiting for someone to come forward with information they've been holding for years, waiting for justice that may never arrive. The lesson, if there is one, is not that we should live in fear. It's not that we should suspect every text message or avoid every unfamiliar building. It's that we should trust our instincts more than we trust our desire to be rational. That hesitation Lauren felt, standing in that parking lot, was her body trying to tell her something. Her subconscious had registered details her conscious mind dismissed, and when she overrode that instinct, when she talked herself into going inside because she didn't want to seem paranoid, she lost her only chance to walk away. We teach people, especially women, to be polite, to be helpful, to not make a fuss. We tell them not to overreact, not to be dramatic, not to let fear control them. And sometimes, that conditioning costs lives, because the person who's trying to hurt you is counting on your politeness, your hesitation, your desire to give them the benefit of the doubt. They're counting on you to walk through that door. Lauren Ashford deserved better than the ending she got. She deserved to go home that night. She deserved to live the life she'd been building, to help more children, to see more sunrises, to have more ordinary Tuesdays where nothing went wrong. Instead, she got 3 minutes of hesitation outside a building that should have been empty, and a decision that seemed reasonable at the time but wasn't. That's the final, terrible truth. Sometimes, reasonable gets you killed. Sometimes, the thing that seems safe is precisely the thing you should run from. And by the time you realize that, it's already too late.